I picked it up on the graveyard watch, which is when most of the strange things find you, because nobody else is awake to explain them away before you've already started caring. I'm a comms technician 3rd class aboard the corvette Aldrich Bay, on picket duty at the edge of a sector nobody had bothered to survey in 30 years. My job that night was routine sweep and log, nothing more. I was 3 hours into a 6-hour shift, running the wideband scan out of habit, rather than hope, when the receiver caught something old. It was a burst. 3 seconds long, compressed, degraded at the edges the way a signal gets when it has crossed a lot of dead space. I logged it as debris noise and moved on. Then it came back. Same 3 seconds. Same waveform, down to the noise floor. I checked the timestamp drift and did the math twice, because the first answer felt wrong. The burst was repeating on a 19-minute cycle. It had been doing that, as far as I could reconstruct from the decay pattern, for something on the order of 90 years. I woke the duty comms chief, a woman named Rasa Okonkwo, who has forgotten more about signal archaeology than I will ever learn, and she did not thank me for it, but she did not go back to bed either. We spent 4 hours pulling the burst apart. It was not a transmission in the sense of a message sent once and heard. It was a loop, somewhere out past the edge of what anyone had mapped, an old relay chain, the kind built by a civilization that liked redundancy more than it liked maintenance, had been passing this same packet from dead node to dead node, each one obeying an ancient instruction to forward anything unacknowledged, for 9 decades, because nobody had ever told it to stop. It was not addressed to us. The header, once Rasa untangled it, carried a destination code that matched nothing in any Earth registry, current or retired. Whoever built that relay chain had built it for themselves, for their own people, on a network Earth had never been invited onto, and had no business overhearing. We were the wrong recipient. The relay chain didn't know that. It only knew the packet hadn't been marked received, so it kept forwarding, node to dead node, until by blind chance, one of those hops crossed our patrol line, and our receiver happened to be listening. Rasa didn't file it as an anomaly. She filed it as a live distress call, because that's what the payload turned out to be once we ran the language model against it. It wasn't a request for rescue in the way the word usually gets used. There was no fleet mentioned, no coordinates for a ship to burn toward. It was a technical plea, the desperate, specific kind, from someone who already understood nobody was coming, and had stopped asking for people, and started asking for a formula instead, a containment failure. A biological agent loose in whatever was left of wherever they were, and a request, 90 years stale, for the synthesis schema of a stabilizing compound their own scientists had run out of time to finish. Command took 2 days to decide what to do about a message that wasn't ours to answer. Captain Farian ran it up 2 levels before anyone above her would even confirm they'd read it, and I sat in on enough of those calls to hear the same objection raised 3 separate times by 3 separate officers. It isn't addressed to us, so it isn't our obligation. Nobody argued with the logic. Farian's answer, each time, was the same short sentence, delivered without heat. Obligation isn't the only reason to do something. Eventually the sentence won, mostly because nobody senior enough wanted to be the one who overruled it in writing. In the end, the decision itself was almost boring, which I've come to understand is usually what the right decision looks like. Nobody scrambled a fleet. There was nothing for a fleet to do. Whatever was on the other end of that relay chain was centuries of transit away, if it still existed at all, and speed was the one thing we actually had that a warship didn't. A dreadnought would have arrived, if it arrived at all, generations after anyone still alive would care. So we didn't send ships. We sent an answer, because an answer was the only cargo fast enough to matter. Rasa and 2 chemists from the Aldrich Bay's medical bay spent 11 days building it. Not a cure, because we didn't know their biology well enough to promise one, but a complete synthesis pathway, annotated step by step, plus our own containment tech schematics translated as closely as the language model would allow, plus a plain, unglamorous note explaining who we were and that we understood this had never been meant for us. Half the work wasn't chemistry at all. It was guessing at grammar we'd never been taught, checking and rechecking that a phrase meaning stabilize didn't also, in some dialect nobody on board could verify, mean something closer to surrender. Rasa rewrote the closing paragraph 4 times because she didn't want it to read like charity. We packed the whole thing into a single tight burst, and sent it back down the exact channel it had come up, on the theory that whatever had been faithfully relaying a message for 90 years might still be faithfully relaying one the other direction. I didn't think we'd hear anything back. Loops that old usually stay loops. 6 weeks later, we did. The reply was short, translated rough at the edges, the same way the original had been, and it came from someone who identified themselves only as a junior communications officer, third watch, at a post I won't try to spell here. I've read it more times than I probably should. She wrote that the relay had been considered decorative for most of her career, a duty nobody expected to matter, checked out of habit rather than hope, same as my scan that first night. She wrote that everyone at her post had assumed the burst was dead, the way old things get assumed dead, not because anyone confirmed it, but because 90 years is long enough that hoping starts to feel like an embarrassing hobby. She wrote that she had grown up hearing about the message the way you hear about a relative who died before you were born. Real, but not really yours. And then one shift, the relay logged a return signal on a channel that had never once returned anything, and she said she sat with it open on her console for 11 minutes before she believed it wasn't corrupted data bouncing back on itself. She didn't thank us the way I expected. She wrote, and I'm paraphrasing badly because the translation software has no grace in it, that she did not know who we were, that the message had never been meant to reach us, that by every rule she had been trained on, we should never have heard it at all, and that she was glad, in a quiet, embarrassed way, that the rule had failed. The synthesis schema worked. Not completely. She was careful to say that. No theatrics, just a technician's honesty, but enough to buy time on a problem that had been unbuyable for 90 years. Enough, she said, that people who were children when the burst first went out might now die of something else instead, decades from now, of something ordinary, which she said in a way that made clear she understood exactly how strange it was to be grateful for that. She asked one question in the whole message, and it's the one I still think about. She asked whether we had known, when we answered, that we were probably too late for most of the people the original signal had been written for. We had known. Farian made me put that in writing before we sent the reply. Plainly, no softening. Ross's answer to her, when it went out, was 3 sentences long. We knew. We sent it anyway. Some of it still mattered. I keep coming back to the 19-minute cycle. 90 years of the same 3 seconds, over and over, aimed at nobody who was listening, until one loop, by pure accident of geometry, crossed a picket line that happened to be occupied by 2 comms techs on a boring watch. I don't know what to call that. Luck feels too small a word, and providence feels too large a one, so I've settled for calling it what Rasa calls it, which is simply, the network did its job. It forwarded an unacknowledged packet exactly as it was built to, for exactly as long as it took, to whoever happened to be standing where the signal finally landed. The relay chain has gone quiet since. She confirmed it in her last message. No more bursts. No more 19-minute cycles. The loop finally closed because somebody, anybody, finally said they'd received it. I understand that's supposed to read as an ending. Mostly it does. But some nights on watch I still run the wideband scan a little longer than the shift requires, in case something else out there has been faithfully repeating itself into the dark for 90 years, waiting on nobody in particular, and it just hasn't crossed our line yet.